Today is a goal setting call for 2025. Ask questions throughout and use the chat function as well. Yeah, D, let's kick it off.
We'll dive straight in then. All right. We're going to have a quick chat about setting effective goals. I'm going to keep it as conversational as possible, so I'm not just rambling for the next 15 minutes. So please do butt in with any questions or any hot takes that you have to add. Coaches, please do jump in. But one of the most important things that we need to do when it comes to setting goals is look at our values. And this is a really nice practice to do, and actually like give yourself a pen and paper and think about these things for a while, where you map out the things that are most important to you. Generally speaking, it's going to be like health, family, friends, faith. Like there's a couple of like pinnacles that pop up. Maybe it's career growth or education. But essentially, if we want to be content, we want to be functioning relatively well on all of these levels. What can happen is that, let's say we have a physical health and a training related goal, but we're struggling on another area of our values. It actually indirectly affects our adherence to our nutrition and training. So instead of banging our head against the wall when it comes to like, why can't I adhere to things? It's something else going on in our life that we need to address so that we can actually adhere to our nutrition. And this is incredibly important. Like if you have the skills there in terms of, you know what to do nutrition-wise, you know what to do training-wise, but you just like are struggling to do it on a regular basis, then we need to look elsewhere as like what is popping up, what is getting in the way. Kunal, is this something that you would like see popping up on a regular basis?
Yeah, quite often. I mean, there's always something that can also hold them back in this. So it could just be mindset, as we mentioned in the past. It could be obviously work, for example. Like, do they have enough to do somewhere else away from it? Friendships, where they are conducive towards, like, let's say your goal here in the fitness world, is someone supporting that. If they're not, that can be quite tricky. If you've been with a group for, let's say you've known them for 25 years and you go out, you drink, that's what you do every single weekend, then suddenly you want to embark in a fitness journey. You're like, hey, I don't want to drink at this moment. That can also be relative.
For sure. And like something that I'll have a conversation with clients with frequently is like, do you have any playtime scheduled? Like we want to look at each of the clients that we work with. They live relatively busy, stressful lives. And we want to look at how do we buffer this stress? And to buffer this stress, we need like this solid sense of meaning. We need a little bit of playtime in our life. And can we look after like our sleep and our overall health? And when we look after these things, our stress tolerance is higher, and we can like adhere to our fat loss goals, but we can also just like feel good on a regular basis as well. This is my favorite way of like goal setting. So it's taking this values wheel and then working down from it. And essentially what we're looking for here is we're looking for the big hitters in terms of goals, because we have infinite things in our life that we want to work on that just aren't as perfect as we'd like them to be. But we can't give time and attention to absolutely everything. So what we need to do is find these big hitters that have multiple effects on multiple domains. So essentially what we're taking is we're taking this super ordinate goal, which is big and murky. It can be work, but let's say this is health. It's like improving your health. We get what it means on a surface level, but it doesn't give us any like behaviors to engage in. We need to break these down into actual behaviors that we want to engage in on a regular basis. So we break these down. Let's say I break it down into eat appropriately, train consistently, practice some mindfulness, and keep a sleep routine. Now I'm getting to get a little bit more specific, but I need to make it even more specific again. Like, what do these things actually mean in terms of daily behaviors? And now I have eat 400 grams of fruit and veg, eat more whole grains, journal about my food behaviors, use the Headspace app. So for some mindfulness, spend some time in nature, and keep the same sleep and wake cycle. So now I actually have like tangible things that I can tick as like either a win or a lose on a daily basis. And we need these things when it comes to goal setting. Because a lot of people will be familiar with like the SMART goals. They're actually used more so like in the corporate world as opposed to like individual behavior change. So using this structure and this layout is actually a better thing to do. The next thing that we want to do is we want to become process orientated. The goal should be mastery over trophy. That's a nice way of looking at it. We're on this never-ending pursuit of improvement. It's not just like I get to this goal and I'm finished. If we want to like truly be successful with these things, we want to become as process orientated as possible. So a big example that pops up here is around scale weight, where if we're extremely outcome orientated, then we only feel like we're succeeding when our scale weight is come down. but it's not an approach with much longevity and much enjoyment along the way. If we're process orientated and we place all of the stock and all of the weight in the behaviors and engaging in things on a daily basis, that's how we become process orientated, and that's what allows us to actually drive progress. George, I'd love a bit of an insight there. Is this something that you see pop up?
A little bit of feedback on someone's Zoom. If you guys can hear us, you may want to mute it. But I got the gist of what you said, Eddie. I think you said along the lines of, like, if you fall in love with the process, then results will follow. I think it's important, like you said, I can still hear someone talking in there. If you have like a broad goal, if it's too broad, then you're not going to follow it. Basically, you want to funnel it down and be a bit more specific with them goals, break it down, and avoid that kind of that all or nothing mentality. Celebrate the wins along the way, and the results will follow that for sure.
That's precisely it. Like we want to be specific with these things. We want to know what boxes we're ticking on a very regular basis, and we want to make sure that we are not just waiting until we're finished with fat loss. We're actually enjoying just the day-to-day kind of like slog of getting your gym sessions in, eating extra vegetables, and placing the weight in, like having a good day. Like being able to get to the end of a day and be like, yeah, do you know what? That was a good solid day. I tick them boxes. And that's where we want to place all our value and all our weight. And when we do that, we actually end up being more successful. We actually end up achieving the outcome more successfully, and we've more enjoyment along the way. So it's so incredibly important that we are process orientated. So this is the next thing that we want to do, is we want to have we want to get rid of rigid restraint and have a degree of flexible restraint. So essentially what we want to be is specific with a degree of flexibility in there. Instead of setting like exact windows for success, or exact like numbers for success, we want to set windows. Let's say, for example, when we are giving a client like estimations in terms of scale weight, we set a window of like, look, if we could lose anywhere between like 4 and 6 pounds this month, that would be fantastic. We set this window for success so that there's degrees of success entailed in there. If you have an individual or you're struggling to get your consistency with your resistance training, we want to add in a degree of success there, where maybe for you 2 sessions a week is a win. Like 3 is great, but 2 is also a win there as well, because we don't want to be doing more than we previously were doing, but falling short of it and feeling like we're failing. Like as long as we're making that gradual improvement on how we were before KMAK, before working with coaching, that's a win. Like that's us taking steps forward in progress. And we really need to celebrate that. And like give yourself that degree of grace of like, yeah, things weren't absolutely perfect, but they were better. And I think that's so incredibly important as well. Archana, I'd love your take on that. I actually can't see it on the screen, but I'm sure you're there.
Yeah, no, 100%. Just to kind of add to everything what you've mentioned over here as well, making sure that you have the ability to adapt towards what you'd like to achieve, and making sure that you can kind of have that degree of flexibility and not being super rigid about things is very, very important, because not only will you be able to enjoy the process a lot more, but it'll give you the ability to kind of move through and be fluid. I think that's one of the key things that I've spoken to quite a few people around this year on, is like, be fluid. Like life is going to happen to you. And if you can move away from things being rigid towards how do I, do one thing really well, how can I be flexible in this scenario, and kind of picking and choosing your most adaptable controllables can be really, really key as well. So that's kind of my 2 cents to this one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I give some like more practical examples of how this pops up on a regular basis. So let's say I take my goal from the values little worksheet that I did a couple of slides ago. So one of them things that popped up was eat 400 grams of fruit and veg a day. Now I want to add some degree of flexibility into that. So maybe what I'm going to do is I'm going to eat 100 grams of fruit and veg with at least 3 to 5 meals. So some days I only hit 300 grams, but then some days maybe I hit 500 grams, but I have this window for success here. And it means that I can stack wins. And when we stack wins, we get that positive reinforcement, we feel good. And when we feel good, that's what keeps us moving forward. If we have that bar for success at an unattainable level, we're consistently feeling like we're falling short of it, that leads us feeling demotivated, deflated, feeling like we're not progressing fast enough. And that's the thing that actually can drive us off track. And we want to decrease the likelihood of that happening, making sure that we have them realistic expectations in place. Another thing that's incredibly important, and these are all things that we see in the literature as well, like this is all based on the best available evidence. we want goals that are approach orientated over avoidance orientated goals. So instead of coming in with the goal of like, I want to eat less hyper palatable ultra processed foods, we don't want to set that as a goal. We want to set a goal of including something. So we want to set a goal of adding it to our diet. Let's say we want to increase our consumption of fruit and veg. And when we have these approach orientated goals versus avoidance orientated goals, they're more successful and there's more enjoyment along the way as well. And essentially what's nice about nutrition is like foods have a displacement effect, that every time you eat something, you don't eat something else. So as a byproduct of you eating more fruit and more veg, you decrease the consumption of, I don't know what it is, Reese's peanut butter cups or something like that. Love a good Reese's, to be fair. But that's exactly what I'm getting at there. We want to have all of these approach-oriented goals where we're adding to our life. So another thing that pops up frequently outside of like training and nutrition is reducing your screen time. And instead of having an avoidance-oriented goal like that, you're better off having an approach-oriented goal like reading more or spending more time outside. And as a byproduct of that, you displace the screen time, but having the approach-oriented goal is actually more successful. So just a little kind of overview of these bits here. So we want to make sure that the goals that we have are process-oriented over outcome-oriented. So we want to make sure that we're focusing on not just that's like when we get to that 12 pounds down or the 10 pounds down, that's when we've succeeded. We're stacking them little wins along the way. It's them daily box ticking. We're placing all of the weight and all of the value in the daily process. We want to have a degree of flexibility or a degree of specificity with flexibility in there as well. So we want to know, like, on a daily basis, what are the things that I have to be doing to get me closer to my goal? But how do I allow myself to be imperfect at this? How do I add that degree of flexibility in there for when life gets in the way? We want to also have a degree of difficulty in there where there's a sweet spot with difficulty. You want to make sure that the goal is like challenging, but not anxiety provoking to the point where you feel overwhelmed. You want to have just that like sweet spot of anxiety where it's like a little bit of ambition. It's a big goal that you're working towards. It's not a trivial pursuit, but it's not overwhelming as well. You want to find that sweet spot with difficulty. And that's about like meeting yourself at your current competence level and what is actually feasible for you to do. And that's what like your coach is going to be there for, to meet you where you're at and just push you just outside that comfort zone. And then making sure the goals are approach orientated over avoidance orientated, making sure that the goals are about adding specific behaviors as opposed to decreasing screen time or ultra processed foods or whatever it is. Anyway, that is my presentation finished. Vicky, do you have anything to add there?
Nothing really too much extra, just probably I'd say how important setting yourself goals is. And I think not just in general, long-term goals, but also short-term and mid-term goals. We sometimes tend to forget that, there's so many other things that we can celebrate along the way of our journey, whether it's, health related or even professionally related. Looking at all short-term, mid-term and long-term, that way we can celebrate those smaller milestones as well. So that's probably one of them. The importance of setting them, I'd say, is just that final touch point.
Absolutely. That's why like having a journey map there or having a roadmap of like, maybe we have this goal that's going to take a year for us to achieve, but we want to be able to have these set points in place of like, okay, in 16 weeks, I'm going to be here. In 30 weeks, I'm going to be here. I do think that's incredibly important as well.
I just wanted to talk about, it'd be good to go into all or nothing, because I think a lot of times right now, people joining and, there are people in this call right now and they're like very, if fat loss is the one, they're all in, especially, but, let's say today goes really badly, I'm then going to start on Monday, right? And it's almost like a constant reset. I would love to dive deep a lot more into that all or nothing mindset. What's your thoughts on that regarding the goals and everything you mentioned in your PowerPoint?
Yeah, so it's like the individuals who can move away from that are the ones who are more successful. Like, there's no point having a perfect week. There's no point having a perfect week. You want to have a decent month. That's what we're aiming for. Can we have a good enough month, and can we stack these months on top of each other? And like, so if you are somebody with like that all or nothing thinking, and you can adhere to things perfectly, like that, the 1% of us, like not me anyway, but like there is them odd individuals who can be all in with something and have perfect adherence. But the vast majority of us end up in this loop of like, either I have things in a perfect spot or they're like bordering on like pretty bad. And we want to find that sweet spot of like, no, if I can just stack these good enough weeks on top of each other, that's precisely what we're aiming for. In terms of like, how do we go about decreasing that? Essentially, what you want to do is catch yourself doing it. Like, catch yourself like in that all or nothing headspace where you're aiming for perfection. You have a good day, but you're not happy with it because it wasn't absolutely spot on. And you want to just consistently pull your barrier for like a barrier for a good day down, or your goal for a good day down.
Yeah, I'm actually reading this amazing book by John D. Rockefeller. It's called 38 Letters to His Son. And one of the letters is all about failure and how you need to go through it in order to see success. In fitness, it's the same thing, because we also think fitness is very short term for a lot of you guys. Not a lot of you guys here, but in general, like as a broad spectrum, everyone's like, I need to get in shape for the summer. But no one thinks about, I need to be in shape for the rest of my life. Right. So it's almost like if you start thinking in that manner, it will completely change the game for you guys as well. But yeah, GP, anything you'd want to add, especially to the, we've seen a lot of all or nothing mindset. We've actually done on the member site, there is actually a special video on all or nothing as well. But seeing you guys here, it'd be good to maybe discuss parts of that as well.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that you want to chase consistency, not perfection. But perfection doesn't exist. And my clients in this chat now would know that I use the tire analogy quite a lot. If you're driving along and you pop one of the tires, you wouldn't get out and pop the other 3 tires, right? You repair the tire and carry on your journey. Same with your nutrition. If you have a bad day of eating, don't let that trickle into the day after, the day after. And I just wanted to touch on like smart targets. You probably all heard smart targets, whether it's business, whether it's fitness. But obviously, like the S, you've got a specific goal. So for me, for example, I'm going on vacation in July. I may need to drop like, I don't know, 20 or 30 pounds, right? Just for an example. Can I measure that? How can I measure it? Daily tracking, weekly tracking. You've got the metrics on the app, so obviously using that as well. Is it achievable? I actually quite like changing the achievable to accountable because I think it's more important. You've got accountability from your coach, but also from the community as well. So user community here, you've got the Facebook chat, and obviously you guys have your WhatsApp chats and so on. Is it realistic? So breaking it down, let's just say it's £30 over the next, 6 months or so, 5.5 months. £4 a month, is that achievable? Yes. £1 per week is doable. And then time frame. So I've got about 5 months until my vacation. Can I make that happen? So smart targets, they're dated in some ways, but in a lot of ways it still works. So having that clear goal, defining that, and having a why behind your goal as well, whether it's your children, whether it's just for yourself, it just makes the goal and the dream a lot more powerful. So that's my 2 pence.
Yeah. Caveat to what also GP's mentioned there. If your goal is to lose, let's say 30, 40 pounds, and sometimes that happens to a lot of people, it's in a short window. We will always be very honest based on what we've seen before. So data from specifically the individual. So if someone's like a bit wishy-washy with their check-ins, they may have lost maybe £2 here and there, but they've never lost more than £4 in a month. We will tell you straight away, that ain't going to work for you, right? Unless something mentally completely flips and you're like, I'm going to make it happen. Like, don't then chase that unrealistic, what GB mentioned, that unrealistic goal. You may want to then change that all the way to, potentially a year. Maybe, if let's say you can do it within 8 months, that's also pretty good as well. So yeah, I hope that gives you guys clarity. I know Archana put some chat in there about questions. Archana, do you want to run through the questions as well?
So there's a question come through about rigidity versus flexibility, and what is a good balance between being rigid about your goals versus building a degree of flexibility in achieving them. The context to this is obviously he's asking this because he's less stressed about the weight and more focused on the long term versus his wife, who is more hyper focused on the weight goal, and not losing weight is causing undue stress, essentially, which then causes for more weight gain. So I guess, Diarmaid, if you would like to kind of dive into that one a little bit more.
It's completely individual specific, and we have 2 perfect examples here of how each individual responds to things. If you are happy with just like things being like slow and controlled, and you're in this for the long term, wonderful. But a lot of us like want to see return on our investment. We want to see the work that we're doing actually being like noticed as progress. But we need to be able to zoom out and be like, okay, cool. Are we making progress on a monthly basis? And that's what we're looking for. If we're seeing like alterations in scale weight week to week, scale weight's bumping up for a week or 2 weeks back to back, and that's then getting in our head and that's stopping our adherence, then that's kind of like a problem that we want to get rectified, because scale weight is going to be, particularly for females as well, we're going to see, based on where you are in your menstrual cycle, you're going to see increased water retention. particularly on the onset of your menstrual cycle. And like that, they're things that we need to be able to factor in. And in situations like that, you want to be process orientated. We have these behaviors. We know what boxes we're supposed to tick. If we're ticking them boxes, all we need to do here is be patient. If we're ticking them boxes and being patient, it's all going to come together. And I think that's the most important thing to be thinking about there.
I'd say regarding being rigid with your goal, one of the things you could also do is you can also be rigid with that goal, but flexibility can be in various forms. Could be flexibility with my training days. So like me and George have sometimes different training days because flexibility around the week, we have that flexibility around meals. So for me, my rigidity could be my meal timing, but what I consume in terms of on a day-to-day basis could be also very, very different, which then creates rigidity plus flexibility. And for a lot of us guys, like, we don't want to have the exact same meal 7 days a week for 365 days. It's impossible because of socials, everything that's going on in life in general. But I think find out what you want to make rigid. So for me, it's always going to be like my meal times. Like I struggle eating after 8. Like my sleep gets knocked out, etc. Like whenever if we go out for a team, me and George are like the first one to look at each other like, mate, it's 8 o'clock. We're going to be battered. Like we can't, this is a bit too late, but that's just normal. But the flexibility is going to be within the food as well. So I think creating that for yourself, I think is really, really important as well. I don't know, Archana, George, anything, Vicky, you want to add to that?
I actually agree with you in terms of the rigidity versus flexibility. Like your goal, typically speaking, the outcome, you don't want your outcome to move around too much, because when your outcome moves around too much and you're almost like, oh well, but I'm here and then I want to be here, and you're not certain about what your outcome is like, that doesn't allow for your process to be to have a direction, essentially. So the rigidity for the goal, for the outcome, should remain where it is because it gives you something to work towards, but the flexibility is in your process. The days you're training, it doesn't have to be the Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or it doesn't have to be whatever days. Like if you needed to move it around, you can move it around. I think you want to think about flexibility more as to like what you're doing on a regular basis and how I can be flexible with my lifestyle, with what I need to do specifically for, I want to say, all of you guys, busy individuals who've got busy lives, anything could come up in a minute. You don't want to be rigid into like, well, I only have to do this at this time on this day, because that will stop you from taking action, and you'll only still keep getting frozen in what you need to be doing. So I think separating out the outcome rigidity and the process rigidity they're two separate topics. And if you look at it in that manner, and think about your process to be more flexible, it'll help you to follow through and be adaptable, as we kind of spoke about earlier on. Any other questions that anyone might have as well? And again, I know that a lot of you guys might be on your lunch break and can't mute yourself, so please feel free to type it in chat. We'll definitely run through those questions as well.
We did have a couple of questions that came in prior. That will be nice to run through. So we had a question around the best strategies to balance rehab exercises and strength gain in order to avoid re-injury of a lower back injury. And I'll take this one because we've got a good couple to run through there. What we want to know is that like our strength training and our rehab, they're essentially the same thing, just with different loads. Like they're not mutually exclusive. So what you want to do is you want to look at like, okay, what movement patterns can I do that are absolutely pain-free? Maybe at the moment, like my squat variations and my RDL variations are off the cards. So I can't do my strength training with them. I have to look at like, okay, I'm going to go through these movement patterns nice and gently, nice and slowly, and just look at like movement and motion as lotion that's going to be like helpful to keep access to that range of motion. So that would be like our rehab exercise would be keeping in the movement pattern just at like 40% of the usual load that we're after using. But we can continue with our strength training side of things on our leg extension and maybe our hip thrust, and maybe all of our upper body exercises are completely pain-free, and we can continue to push them. When you are faced with an injury, it's really about like focusing on what you can do as opposed to what you can't. How do we make these modifications that we can continue to take steps forward in progress, whilst just working around the injury, and then gradually, like on an individual case-by-case basis, how do we make modifications to the training to get the individual back doing like squats or deadlifts or whatever the exercise is. And the big thing here is just managing your headspace. Like when you're injured, it just is so disheartening. And you can feel like you're completely stagnant, and it can affect like your nutrition and your physical activity as a whole. And what you really need to be able to do there is like stay in control of what you can. Like what can I do here? It's completely pain-free for you to get your steps in. You still can do training. It's just different types of training. And as long as we stay in control of them things, control our nutrition as much as we can, that's all we can do. And a big thing as well is actually injuries reduce to the mean really quickly. A lot of the time when you injure your back, like give it like 7 days and it will be back to normal. And it's because you didn't actually cause any damage. There was just like extra sensitivity in that area, and give it a week and things will be back to normal and you can get back into your normal training pretty quickly.
I was just going to say, like, also we've worked obviously with a lot of physiotherapists, we've spoken to a lot of physiotherapists. They always encourage like a still element of movement. Obviously, pain threshold is going to be very, very different for a lot of you guys. Vix, I know we've done like a rehab special as well, which some of you guys actually will have access to, depending on if you have like depending on the type of injury. Vix, do you want to dive deep into that as well?
Yeah, so completely agree with Dee, what he said, and everything you've covered, obviously depending on injury. There's so many other things you can still focus on to not completely neglect, movement in general. But firstly, you may have heard this saying before, but movement is medicine, and it genuinely does, whatever the movement is, whether it is strength training, walking, swimming, anything like that, that genuinely is something that will help some shape or form in the progression to obviously heal that injury to an extent, right? But when it comes to, for example, a lower back injury, a slip disc or a herniated disc or anything like that, those are a little bit more serious injuries. And the main thing here is that you actually realize what the priority is. And the priority is not that you still go into the gym or still strength train and still continue pushing on that, because yes, you can, but your priority should be actually rehabilitation and making sure that you are in a good position to actually still progress in your strength training. Because if you don't do the rehabilitation exercises that, for example, your PT or your rehab specialist in general has actually provided you with, then you're already a step back from that progression to heal, all in all. So the importance of actually doing your rehab exercises in general will always be top priority. The strength training side of things, that can come after. But just like Dee said, let's say, for example, your lower back is injured, focus on your rehab movements for those. You can still, for example, do quite a lot of resistance-based machines to still get some engagement going in. Resistance bands, if you have experienced any of our rehab videos on True Coach, you'll notice that a lot of that is based on resistance bands, which is also just as effective. But yeah, all in all, there's so many things you can still work around with, but the main priority is your injury. And unless that is healed and sorted, I would say there's no other priority there.
We have a few more questions that have come through. So one question is on how long does it take to see a noticeable transformation? What motivation factors are tangible that we can use before seeing scale weight and outward appearance changes? George, I'm going to throw this one to you.
I guess it depends on the individual. I know that sounds like a bit of a cop out, but someone that wants to drop 10 pounds might notice more difference from their physique compared to someone that may need to drop 50 pounds, for example. So it does depend on the individual and how long it will take. That being said, we do aim for between 0.5 to 1% of your body weight per week. So that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea there. In terms of motivation, this comes up all the time. Oh, I'm not motivated, blah, blah. I think motivation will get you started, but discipline will keep you going. I think that's important to remember. And it goes back to having them goals in place, having your why there as well. Something that's quite powerful, bigger than motivation, basically, because motivation, inevitably, it will fade. That's why you've got to have systems in place, have good habits in place to keep the journey going throughout. And look, you can obviously have external motivation factors as well, like using the community, using your coach and so on, listening to motivational podcasts or YouTube videos. But that will only give you that burst of motivation for that 10 minutes or that hour or whatever. In terms of, what was the other question about tangible? Was it tangible or something you said, Archie?
Yeah, so tangible progress points, I'm guessing that's the question. So what motivation factors that are tangible can one use before seeing scale weight and outward appearance changes?
I guess just your overall mood, your well-being, obviously things like your clothing size, how you're feeling, how you're performing in gym sessions and so on. The list goes on. There's many different wins you can celebrate throughout. But hopefully that answered your question.
I think you also stack it up. So let's say today's the first day in the gym. How many days of that can you just like slowly stack up? It can start with like, we've heard the whole trick of, oh, your clothes ready the night before. Do you know what shoes you're going to wear then? Like, I actually do this. I know someone said to me, what are the like rigid rules we have? I realized I do this more often than not until like I just realized it now. But I know typically it's always 10 a.m. in the morning with GP. So that's like by 9:30, I'm out of the house, right? I'm driving. It takes me half an hour exactly. If Max is coming to the gym, he has to be at my house at 9:15, right? It's like everything is to the dot. If he's not, it's like, where are you at? So we have certain I have certain rules on this, but I've just realized, yeah, that's something that you guys can like potentially do as well. But hopefully that helps. 2 cents from my end.
Absolutely. Hopefully that gives a couple of pointers. A few more questions or comments that have come through. So one was on about finding routine that's sustainable in the daily life based on a starting point. So obviously a lot of people generally starting up the program tend to be at a, good eating habit, generally healthy eaters as well. But it's a huge knowledge curve for a lot of people. Obviously, once they, get their plans, they're obviously getting started as well. So the question here is it would be helpful to consider a gradual transition or phased approach or soft land to eating the way the program dictates. Now, obviously, we kind of do this in a way that makes sure you kind of get put into the deep end as well. And it may feel like a huge knowledge curve, but you're probably better off starting at that point because even for yourself, sometimes you don't realize what your capabilities are until you put yourself in that. So the reason why we almost put you in that position, and not to say that we always want people to struggle or anything as well, by all means, that's not the intention whatsoever. But once you realize, once going through a couple of weeks of this program, you realize what you can and cannot do. And we always make it a point to ensure that whatever we are putting together, it is in alignment with what your lifestyle would be like. And of course, if any adaptations need to be made beyond that, that's 100%, we're open to that discussion. We don't want to be rigid to the point of, no, you only have to do this and it only has to be in this manner. We want to make sure that whatever we are giving to you in your plans is kind of working together with you. And phased approaches may work for some, but I feel like sometimes just putting yourself into the deep end actually does work a lot better. I don't know if Dermot, George, KMAK, do you guys have any other comments on that one?
Yeah, the problem with phase approaches, it's too slow for some people. Yeah. And we've seen this. And by the way, guys, like me personally, I've coached well over 500 people, and I've seen it where if you go super, super slow, they're like, I give up. We're all humans. We're kind of designed, like if you pay for something, you want quick either ROIs or whatever that is, and you're like, I want something to happen to me like real quickly right now. So whereas the rigidity creates, and most people historically, and this is when I was like even 20 years old, would be like, can you give me a meal plan? Right? Can you give me a meal plan? I just want to follow a meal plan. Right? And then one of the things that we've done is we've created that rigidity, then it goes into flexibility. And that flexibility long term is the reason why like there's so many recipes that clients create within macros is because the flexibility end up getting, right? If they didn't have that flexibility, it would be very, 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 very difficult to create anything in general as well, right? So remember, like 1 week's worth of like, let's say, quote unquote, rigidity is worth it for probably the rest of your life, if that makes sense. So yeah, again, this is like something that I've seen like over the last 10 years at least of my life.
All right, next question here is some more examples on flexible rigidity rules that you guys actually live by or that you've seen are successful amongst clients. More examples like eating by 8 p.m. or any sort of examples of that sort of that rigidity versus flexibility. That's kind of the question here. So, Dermot, do you want to go ahead and answer that one?
Yeah, so a big one for me would be my bedtime. So we have a window when we know, okay, I'm going to try get 7-8 hours sleep a night. I want to make sure I'm up nice and early and I want to make sure I'm in bed nice and early. But I don't want to have like an exact time there where I have to be asleep by 10 o'clock. No, I'm going to give myself that window of if I'm asleep anywhere between 9:45 and 10:30, that's a win. And I think that's a pretty good example of having that degree of flexibility in there whilst also having a goal that you're aiming for.
Awesome. Hope that helps answer your question. Vicky, I'm going to give this one to you. Would you recommend adhering to a rigid meal plan during fat loss or having variety so you can have more recipes on hand? Would it help during maintenance phase or is it very different and not applicable? I guess going with the first one for the fat loss.
Yeah, so for fat loss, I don't know, you get both approaches from different people. Some people don't mind eating the same things on a day-to-day basis. They enjoy having the exact same breakfast, the exact same lunch. I definitely enjoy having the same breakfast and lunch just for pure ease as well. And especially if you find something that you like, why are you going to, there's no need to fix something if it's not broken. But I do always recommend, and I do always suggest variety in your food, because you can get bored. And, if you're not enjoying your food and you are bored of your food, you're not going to want to follow it. It kind of leads you onto a different track of potentially, eating takeout or ordering something, or completely having something off plan, or eating what you've prepped. You've not enjoyed it, you haven't finished it, and then you're going to go and end up snacking on something else. So I think it's really important to find what works best for you. Whether eating the same things works for you, great. Stick to that. Don't overcomplicate things. I always like to just stick to basics and keep things very similar throughout the week, even if that means literally having the same dinner maybe 2-3 times out of the week and then changing it up, because it works for me. So it's best of both worlds, I'd say.
Also, I think to add to that as well, I think with long term, everyone will have like 15 go-to foods that eventually they'll just keep going back to. So for me, it's oats, eggs, chicken, fish, etc., etc. Like that's all I would go for, right? So eventually, you guys will always go back to the things that you want to kind of go with, and then you just give and take the portions based on the numbers allocated to you guys as well. So I think over time, like you guys will start to realize, longer the journey goes on, the longer you are in fitness, the more you realize like your options as well. Like if you want to obviously make shack and rotary work for you, you can. But longer you go, it will just be like certain choices that you go for, which will work. But yeah, Archana, over to you.
Awesome. Next question on here is, what are some things you tell yourself or tricks you follow when you have cravings for soda and sweets? That usually happens after a long day when you feel you need to unwind. And I think we get this quite often, is like the need to want to unwind and that need to want to just like let out, and it kind of always relates to some aspect of food. I usually kind of relate it back to like it's going to be a quick dopamine hit for some people, but you don't always need to have that as well. I'm going to push this one to George because I feel like he's going to be the best person to answer this.
I have a massive sweet tooth, by the way, and I do have tendencies to kind of snack in the evening time as well. I think it comes down to kind of your habits and wants versus needs. I do think it's easy for a coach to say, hey, don't eat chocolate at the end of the day, right? Or whatever it is, soda. But realistically, some clients are going to do it anyway. So what I would say is account for it, because what gets measured gets managed. If you know that you're going to have 300 calories worth of junk food every single night, save the calories earlier in the day so you can have that food. Obviously, you can go for lower calorie options. If it is sodas and stuff that you like, you can get sugar free. You can get lower calorie snacks as well. Sometimes they can add up, but that's the problem. You end up having 4 or 5 100 calorie snacks, and you might as well just have the whole chocolate bar. Making sure you've hit your goals for the day is important. You don't want to have a super bad day of eating, and then once again, the all or nothing mindset where you think, oh, do you know what? I've messed up my day now. Let me just go and eat the whole tub of chocolate or whatever it is. So kind of like make sure you've earned it before you have it at the end of the day, and ultimately learn from it. If you're like, damn, I keep binge eating every single Friday night, could you replace that eating window with something else? Potentially going for a walk with the family, or like I said, swapping out for some lower calorie snacks as well. But yeah, hopefully that helps.
I mean, someone asked in the chat as well about, can I add like C's candies as well to my plan? Shout out Warren Buffett, because I think he's an investor. I would say you can always make it work within like on a day-to-day basis. But again, one, you don't get the nutritional like content well. You don't get the fiber. So you'll always be like, I guess, hungry. But once in a while, there's no issues with it. Right? So you can make it work. We've had someone who's got shredded by having KFC like every week in their plan. Right, every Saturday this guy wanted KFC, so it was like a chicken rice box that he had regularly. So it's not like, sometimes they get demonized, like good food, bad foods, etc. It's just the nutritional content behind it, preparation, etc. But if you're going to be realistic, will you have it once in a while? Yeah, most likely. So you'd rather just include it once in a while.
100%. Next question here is, how does one know when pushing hard is causing more harm than benefit when we're trying to push ourselves at the gym? This is more to prevent injuries. Vicky? 2
things on this one. Firstly, the importance of training videos, especially to us, because we can that way assess, give you feedback, even if it's literally a small tweak, such as readjusting your feet, or, pushing your shoulders back, keeping your gaze, looking forward. It can literally be such a minor thing that's going to just sort the form out like that. But as well as that, it's also important to, let's say, you've had a couple of weeks off, or, it's the first time you're going into the gym, or you've been going for a long time as well. ego lifting is something that I feel like we've all been through at some stage in our journey of being in the gym. You know, sometimes we're like, yeah, you know, we can do this, and we probably can. However, that ego side of things is potentially going to cause a long-term injury because you are more concerned about lifting that weight, I don't know, to maybe prove something or because, you know, it's there, whereas your form is then sacrificed. So I'd say it's just building up. So let's say, for example, you're at maybe 50 pounds. Rather than doing a big jump from 50 pounds to 80, 90 pounds, do 50 pounds, then 60 pounds, 70, and build up like that and get comfortable with the weights like that, because that way you'll get more confident, you'll get more comfortable with that. And maybe you'll get to 70 pounds and you think, do you know what, actually, this is it. I'm potentially feeling it a little bit more in my lower back. I'm going to drop this down and go from there. So that's the importance of that. And training videos are like 100% pointer there.
Absolutely. Hope that helped answer the question. Next question is again on snacking. Basically having a snack after dinner if you've had your yogurts and everything for the day, and if after an hour or so after dinner, just kind of craving food. I think a few things on this is already related to what we mentioned earlier on. How do you track your food? Are you tracking your snacks? Can you add in something post dinner that will help satiate you on that one? But sometimes just even looking simply at your meal timings, like, are you having your meals too early in the day potentially? That's causing you to then not have sort of those meals in the evenings. I find that can be really helpful to push sort of your first meal later on in the day. That means your dinner can go slightly later as well, giving you the satiety that you're looking for, and if ultimately not allow you to crave the food later on, essentially. But I think it boils down to, like, if that's something you need or feel like you need on a regular basis, being able to add that in earlier on in your meal plans, and almost preempting it. A lot of the meal planning does come from like preempting how you're going about it, what your like day-to-day looks like, and being aware of it very much at the beginning. Hope that helps answer the question as well. Next one again is on training. So can you please explain how I should be progressing with the weight in terms in training exercises in terms of increasing by adding the weights? For example, I do 45 pounds and 3 pounds for 12 reps for squats. Instead, should I do 40 pounds, 45 pounds, and then 50 pounds? So I guess the question is on increases as well. So Diarmuid, do you want to answer that one?
Yes. So we have a nice like general rule that is really helpful here. Let's say your coach programs you a set of deadlifts and the rep range is 8 to 12. Once you hit the 12 reps, then you want to increase the weight. Like that is the best way of approaching it. So let's say I go in and I do 60 pounds for my deadlift and I do 8 reps. And then 4 weeks later, I'm doing it for 12 reps. I've hit the top end of the rep range. Now it's time to increase the weight. That's a nice general heuristic to follow there.
Anyone have anything to add to that?
Sorry, yeah, using your coach, because if you're saying, oh, I'm hitting 12 reps and you keep upping the weight, but you're not uploading videos like Vicky said, you might be doing more damage than good. So making sure you're using your coach, don't chase lifts just for the sake of it. There's no point ego lifting because your body will catch up and that, you know, that you are ego lifting with an injury and so on. So once again, using your coach for that video feedback.
100%. So we have the last 2 questions on here, and then we'll kind of wrap it up after that. So we obviously have a question here on intermittent fasting, and then what a recommended window of time is. Kunal, I want to go to you on this one because I like this conversation.
Yeah, so there's one also from Tej regarding supplements. We'll dive deep into as the last one, but intermittent fasting. So intermittent fasting has been around for years. A lot of people see when they join it, they're like, Kunal, I'm doing intermittent fasting. Like, I think everyone to a large extent does it. My thoughts on it is, if it works for you and your lifestyle, brilliant. I don't think it's a tool that can be used for fat loss. I don't think it's the answer for fat loss. So if you're after like losing 10 pounds and you think I'm only going to do intermittent fasting, but if you overeat in those like that window that you end up having, you're not still going to drop body weight. So just an FYI. So I do intermittent fasting, but that's because I train in the morning. And usually after I've trained with George, I come back home. That's when usually my first meal is. And usually I always perform quite well. When I'm fasted, I prefer it. But again, it's not like, I don't think of it much more. Now, there's a whole rule, which is it's 16-8. You can do whatever what guys want to like do. But would we encourage it? I don't think it's like needed to get the results you're after. I don't think that many clients have done, got amazing shape and they're like, I've only done intermittent fasting. I think it's way more than that. So, I don't think you would need to do it, but some people, if they like, I want to be busy in the morning, I don't want to eat. I've got things to do, things to run, etc. I'd rather focus on that. So if you're a very busy individual, you've got meetings in the morning, maybe hold fire, on that meal for late in the day. I think that'd work a bit better. So yeah, hope that helps regarding intermittent fasting.
Awesome. Tej, so first of all, welcome to the program and excited to obviously see you crush it this year. So obviously your question's more on supplements, such as creatine, which you've obviously never taken before as well, and whether they or any other supplement should be added onto the nutrition plan. George.
I think context is key, right? It depends on the individual. It's not one size fits all. So creatine for some people, yes, but I've also had clients in the past that can't take creatine for different reasons. So speak to your coach and work out what supplements are probably right for you in your journey. Once again, it's not one size fits all, unfortunately. So I can't just say yes or no right now without knowing the context behind it.
Yeah, I got asked this on my Friday Q&A last week, like I think 3 questions in a row regarding creatine. So creatine, by the way, guys, is one of the most researched supplements. I know a lot of people sometimes get scared of supplements in general, but remember, it is also still a supplement. I've never seen someone like, let's say if you're trying to achieve fat loss, but you overeat from like a deficit, and then you only have creatine, you're not going to get shredded still, right? So remember that. I think a lot of people sometimes get very much caught up in, will it work for me, will it not work for me? Trust me, we've had people never take creatine and they still get amazing results. And we have also had people on the other side who've taken creatine and still got results. So, but 5 grams is the rule of thumb, by the way, guys. 7 days a week. Don't try and cycle it, and stay hydrated. Really important.
One last one that's come through, just kind of a follow-up on the training side of things. So how do you handle the second and third set? Do you prioritize a rep count over heavy weights? I.e., if you go to 12 reps at 60 pounds, do you stick with the 60 pounds for the second set and go for 8 reps? Or do you go for 12 reps and lower the weight? Jamed.
In all honesty, it doesn't really matter too much. Like you can just do whatever you fancy. Let's say you do a nice heavy set for your first set, and you're like, oh, that was brutal there. I'm going to do a set that's a little bit lighter in weight and higher reps. So you can have this kind of top set and back off approach. Your first set, you do like 6 to 8 reps. And then your second set, you do 10 to 12 reps. Something like that is like absolutely fine. But essentially, it doesn't matter too much. They're both going to lead to non-inferior outcomes. So it's just about you doing what you fancy in that session. I think that's the most important thing there.
Last one that's come through, and we'll kind of wrap it up after that one. There's a quick one on energy drinks, for example, like Celsius.
Go on it. I've had it. I love it in general. But again, it's not something that, like, even when I go to the gym now, I actually have Nocco with me, which is a British brand, which is like a British version of Celsius. I use it, but do I think it's like, I wouldn't be like addicted to it. I wouldn't try and be addicted to it. I wouldn't have it on a regular basis. I personally, I used to go from like having a lot of like EAAs and BCAAs when I was growing up to now I sometimes just have water. And that's really it. So, what's my thoughts on it? Like, you can have it whenever you want, but just still be wary of like the ingredients, the contents. Some of them contain caffeine as well. And it's a lot of caffeine. So just be careful. If you're not used to having 200 milligrams in like one hit, your heart will be pounding. So just be careful on certain energy drinks in general. There's a lot more of them now in the market than ever. I mean, there's another question was just thoughts on pre-workouts. My thoughts on pre-workouts, again, used to be heavy into them. But again, a lot of people get reliant on them. And then as a result, they use that as an excuse as to why the workout wasn't good. Right. And you can only take it in like one period, which is in the mornings. I think anything after 12, your sleep is going to be disrupted. I used to have one client used to take it at 6 p.m. in the evening. And I was like, dude, chill out. We don't need to take it during that time. But stimulants are a bit better sometimes, like L-citrulline. But that's me going too deep into it. That's for another day, realistically, as well. Archana, over to you.
All right, one absolutely last one. They're just like coming through. How long in between sets do you need to rest? Like, I think this is also kind of dependent upon like how your training program's set out as well. But ideally, we say sort of 30 to 60 seconds when you just are getting started. And then after that, as you start lifting heavier, it's worth the while to even take a slightly longer rest, even up to sort of a minute and a half to replenish your energy stores to do a pretty heavy lift at the same time. So that's kind of the rule of thumb that we go by. And then last one here is protein shakes before workouts. I typically try not to do a protein shake before a workout. I would leave it for after. And if you wanted to do one before a workout, make sure that you do it at least an hour and a half. I think you mentioned there an hour and a half. So yeah, definitely an hour and a half before training. Anything closer to that, and you're just going to be sick. So you definitely don't want to be in that position. So I'd say recommend for you to have your protein shake after your workout, because it just works a lot better that way.
But also, caveat to that, don't try and have it like a minute after you finished.
Yeah.
Body's under a lot of stress and you're trying to consume basically a lot of calories regardless, and protein. Like I've gone through this where like I'm super bloated. I don't like the feeling. So I think just being mindful. Your body needs to still calm down from like a stressful training is a stress on your body at the end of the day. People need to realize that. Perfect.
Awesome. This kind of wraps up all the questions from my end. Kunal, do you want to kind of close out?
Guys, it's been amazing. We will be back again next week. This is going to be a weekly reoccurrence. We also have a guest speaker. We have a behavioral psychologist coming in 2 weeks, I believe, D. Is it
24th on the Friday? They're usually going to be on the Thursday, but he's on the Friday. 2 weeks.
Yeah. And we're going to get guest speakers in every single month. So if there's any specialist subjects you guys want to like understand, then obviously please feel free to DM me or put in the Friday Q&A potentially as well. But apart from that, guys, it's been a pleasure. Peace.